We're really glad to see you here for our discussion tonight on resource extraction and the future of a green economy. And I actually want to check a little bit kind of who's in the room and the sentiment in the room. Can I ask you all to stand up first? We're going to do a little bit of exercise here just to do this. Okay, great. How many of you have ever ridden in an electric car? Oh, yeah, nice. How many would like to ride in an electric car who haven't yet? Ooh. How many people have ridden on an electric bike? Oh, yes, everyone, cool. How many people have solar power wherever they're living? Solar panels, nice. Okay, so these are all parts of the green economy. So I have another question for you. How many of you are fearful of the people up on stage? So why are those of you in the back of the room so far back? There's lots of room up front. Please move forward. We actually want to have an intimate discussion, please, about resource extraction in a green economy. And what are the opportunities in the green economy? Thank you, those of you who are moving forward. And what are the challenges that we need to deal with? And the subtitle of tonight's section, you all can sit down again. Thank you, sorry. But please move forward, those in the back. The subtitle is Eliminating Sacrifice Zones in the Just Transition. And I ask about electric vehicles and electric bikes and solar panels because they all have materials in them. Lithium, copper, rare earth, cobalt, all sorts of things you probably have never even heard of, cadmium, molybdenum, iridium. Those all have to come from somewhere. And we want to figure out how do we move to a green economy in ways that don't leave sacrifice zones anywhere in the world. So a really important topic. And we are so pleased to have leading that conversation with us tonight, two of the most amazing activists around the globe addressing some of the key issues around that. And I will introduce them in just a second. But just to say that this event tonight is part of a week-long celebration, a conference of Right Livelihood. And if you don't know what the Right Livelihood Award is and the Right Livelihood College, there's lots of information up front, so you can learn about it there. But it's basically an award to recognize the work of people around the globe trying to solve some of the world's greatest challenges around environmental issues, around human rights, around economic justice. And we are tremendously fortunate at UC Santa Cruz to have been part of a Right Livelihood College network that was established in 2010 to learn from the laureates, to connect the next generation of leaders and activists with those laureates to help provide support for that work going forward. So UC Santa Cruz has been part of that network for 10 years, and we're here to celebrate that this week. We have a grouping of 12 students from campuses all across the globe, Europe, Africa, Asia, India, all sorts of places, which is really exciting. And we are just taking on now at UC Santa Cruz, because of our work in the network over the last 10 years, the role of coordinator of the whole network. The Global Secretariat is the official title. So part of this conference is thinking about and planning for, the next decade of the Right Livelihood College Network and how we can work with laureates and support them going forward. So of course we are not on that journey by ourselves. We've had lots of support for this conference, and I want to acknowledge a few of those sources of support. One, this is the Kamenecki Lecture for the year. Sheldon Kamenecki was a former dean, and some of his friends, families, and supporters created an endowment to support speakers, and this is the 5th version of that. The first one was in 2018 when we had another Right Livelihood conference here. But we've also gotten support from the UC Santa Cruz Foundation. We're deeply grateful for them, the Division of Social Sciences, and the Humanities Institute, the Dolores Huerta Research Center for the Americas, the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, the Peggy and Jack Baskin Foundation, the Student Fee Advisory Committee, thank you, all you students, Merrill College, and I hope I didn't miss any, but if you did, know that you're in our hearts, and we really appreciate all the support. So I do want to say that at the end of the discussion tonight, closer to about 8:40, we've got a special treat, a performance artist that I will introduce you to when we get to that point. But without further ado, I want to interview the people leading this discussion tonight. Phyllis Omido is from Kenya. I learned last night that she originally didn't think of herself as an environmental activist. She was just a mother and a worker, and discovered that a lead battery smelting plant was poisoning her child and her community. And this is important because lead batteries, of course, are in fossil fuel cars and are often talked about as a success story because something like 98% of lead batteries are actually recycled in the US. But what happens to them after they're so-called recycled? Some of them end up in places like Phyllis's community in Kenya that she'll tell you about. So she has become a leading environmental activist, raising these issues of poisoning in her community and really thinking about understanding the whole cycle of production systems. And she will be joined, they're both on stage already, but in conversation with Juan Pablo Orrego, who is a musician. He was just up here practicing a little bit earlier. And an activist, and if we're fortunate, he might talk a bit about his connection between music and environmental activists. He was become most prominent in some of his work about protecting the Biobío River in southern Chile and central Chile from major dams, but has since become focused a lot on mining as well. Chile is the largest source of copper in the world. Electric vehicles, actually, if you take the steel and aluminum aside, have 5 times as much materials in them as a fossil fuel car, and copper is the largest portion of that. So Chile is a really critical part, also for lithium, which is really critical. And they will be led in conversation by our very own Fernando Leiva. He's a professor of Latin American and Latino studies, originally from Chile. He received his PhD in economics at the University of Mass Amherst, and his own work, which is really relevant for tonight, is studying emerging strategies of multinational extractivist corporations and the strategies they deploy to overcome community resistance to mining in their community. So please join me in welcoming Juan Pablo Orrego, Phyllis Omido, and Fernando Leiva. Sorry, I forgot one other thing. Sorry. We will have a chance for question and answers, and we will have cards, 3x5 cards that I'll be handing out, and you can fill out the questions, and if you see me wandering around, we're ready to gather those questions that we'll bring up at the end. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It's a real privilege and honor to moderate this conversation with these two amazing human beings. In the session that we had yesterday morning, one of your colleagues mentioned that the ingredients for success of your campaigns was knowledge, organization, and tactics. But I think there was one element that was left out, and that is a commitment to justice. And both of you led successful campaigns to avoid the creation of sacrifice zones. And we understand sacrifice zones as populated areas where high levels of pollution and environmental hazard affect people given the toxic production, mining, energy production, right? So since we're going to be talking about a just transition, this notion of justice, I want to ask each one of you how notions of justice, reaction to injustice, propel you on the path to become a land defender, a community defender, environmental activist, and how has that notion of justice changed as you engaged in your efforts? Phyllis, would you like to share with us that trajectory?
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. So for me, from an early on stage, it never made sense. It still doesn't make sense to me why a community that does not own even one car should be the one that bears the brunt of lead poisoning from batteries that are imported from more developed countries to be recycled in their home. For me, justice means access to information, the right to participate in processes, and access to justice and effective remedies. This is what a just energy transition looks like for me. The fact that a community can host a smelter that is extracting lead for export without any one of them giving their consent, without any information being given to the community to help them make a decision as to whether they want to accept this process in their community or not. The fact that even after they discovered that this smelter that was brought to their community with the promise of creating jobs and elevating their economic situation, after they discovered that he had actually poisoned them, poisoned their children, killed them, caused their mothers to miscarry, at the end of the day, the community still is unable to access justice. These are things that I cannot come to terms with, and these are the gaps that we need to actually look at when we are talking about a just energy transition. There has to be inclusion of every one of us on the planet. It cannot be a decision that is made from one part of the planet and then imposed to another set of people. If we are talking about a just energy transition and we are deciding that we need to recycle batteries, there is need for all of us to participate in that decision as to whether we want to accept batteries to be recycled in our home, in our communities or not.
Thank you. Juan Pablo.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon or evening, I guess. So great to be here together. Powerful, really. You know, and it surprises me. I'm a bit more aged, I think, than most of you. It surprises me how unjust is humanity, you know, unfortunately. I mean, the amount of injustice that one sees, you know, every single day. You know, there is no real reason for any poor person or homeless person to exist. There's no thermodynamic reason for that. That is it's a social, cultural product, you know, an economic and political product. So we live in a very unjust system, you know. But personally, more personally, I lived and survived the military coup in Chile, Pinochet. I wasn't into politics, you know, but my whole family in the left and involved with Allende's government, you know. And I was a good friend of a musician, for example, Victor Jara. You might know him. We played together. We recorded 2 of his songs, you know. And he was murdered and massacred, tortured and murdered. Talk about injustice. Victor had never had a weapon in his hands. You know, he was a musician, a singer, but with an extraordinary charisma. So he would sit just like here with you, you know, with a guitar, and start educating, you know, in very simple words, but very smart. You know, like, do you know what we are trying to do with Compañero Allende? You know, you understand this issue of the means of production and, whatever. I would start like a political, socio-political class from the stage. And then, on top of everything, he would sing the most beautiful song in the world, right? So the impact was impressive, right? So these guys, the military, they knew who to silence, and to torture and kill. So that's an example of total injustice. And then regarding my work, we discovered this huge mega dam project in the upper Biobío. These engineers and these entrepreneurs who saw this river only as a bounty, They only saw the megawatts and the dollars or whatever, pesos in the water, this kinetic energy of the water transformed into electricity, transformed into money. And this was maybe the richest, ecologically richest ecosystem in Chile. It's an ecotone in the center of the country. It's a long story, but a beautiful place it was, and still is, but very hurt. And inhabited by Pehuenche communities, these indigenous people of pre-Columbian ancestry, And our country and these entrepreneurs, they wanted to dam the whole upper Biobío. So these people did not even see the communities, the ecosystem, just blind to the ecosystem, the beauty, the biodiversity, an astounding place. It still is, but hurt, as I said. And they didn't see the communities living there. They acted, and planned the project as if nothing of that existed in that place. So again, talk about injustice, And so, and I was telling Dave, who has been my contact here and the person who invited me. So thank you so much, David, and for all your kindness, the Pehuenche, were totally ignored. So in this cause, I'm going to finish, only in this Biobío cause, there was a confluence of issues, all of them key issues: the ecological aspect, an universe; the indigenous aspect, another universe; the energy aspect, electricity, energy, another universe, So, and then the political, or let's say democracy. I mean, who is taking these decisions? I wasn't asked. If I wanted those dams, the Pehuenche were not asked, but the rest of the Chilean population were not asked either, you see. So that's what I mean. I'm sorry, and I'm not negative. I'm not a pessimist person, and I'm not a negative person, at all. But let's face facts in the face, So they were never asked, and they just imposed. And we fought, Look at your ages, some of you. We fought for 12 years. Trying to stop, this mega project of six dams. And we were defeated because they built two huge, Pangue and Ralco. We couldn't even change the design, the scale, nothing. They were built just as they were planned, And then they built a third one, okay? But we stopped 4. And more, even deeper than that, we modulated the history of hydro development in Chile, because we took away the license for these monsters, for a while though, because then they came back with the vengeance, as we say, as you say, and they tried to build 5 dams in Patagonia. And the thing is, with the experience, very bad experiences and very beautiful experiences that we had from the Biobío campaign, we were able to totally defeat this Hidroaicén project in the heart of Chilean Patagonia. So we achieved a sort of environmental and social justice, because on top of everything, that project in Patagonia, they wanted to build a 2,000-kilometer transmission line with huge, monstrous, power towers or whatever. So this within our work, beginning as an ecologist, I studied ecology, I have a master in environmental studies, we had to go into these other issues and topics, injustice, democracy, development, etc., etc. And into the constitution, actually. We started criticizing Chile's constitution from the Bio campaign onwards, and we were right, because that's where the structural problem is situated in many ways, is in the constitution.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the dilemmas of the green transition is that the production of these new sources of energy is going to require the extraction of vast amounts of minerals, copper, lithium, nickel, others. We've seen how the old extractivism, one of the consequences of it has been environmental racism, environmental injustice, violence, inequality, concentration of power, all of these things that we see, that we have seen. How do you think we can ensure that as we witness this new green extractivism, that we avoid the same pitfalls? Is it possible? Based on your experience, in addition to what you mentioned earlier, what other aspects do you think we need to pay attention to?
For me, I'm 100% against extractivism. I think you should keep it in the ground. However, in situations where, for example, we are able to recycle and recover metals from the ones that are already existing, it is paramount that those that are in charge of creating or manufacturing these products ensure that they take responsibility for the full cycle of their products, including the end of life of a product. Right now there is a push towards solar, which is amazing, but that brings about lots and lots of batteries that we need to store that solar energy. And yet again, it means there's a lot of recycling that will happen, especially when it comes to used lead acid batteries that are being used especially to store this solar energy. It is, for me, yet again unacceptable that a battery that is used in the global north should end up being recycled in Africa. If it is used here, it has to be recycled here. The thing is, Africa is still growing. Our laws are still quite weak, and many corporations are taking advantage of this. They are entering communities, extracting minerals that do not benefit the community at all. The mode in which they use to displace communities and cause havoc by partnering with, people in power that do not care about communities. That model has to change. Communities must come on the table. If we get to a point where we actually need to get the minerals from the ground, then the communities that own that land must be involved in the decision. They must be relocated in a humane way. They must be compensated, and they must benefit from the minerals that are being mined in their territories. The problem is that in many cases, look at the DR Congo, where there's so much copper. The only thing that exists there is anarchy. There's a lot of child labor, a lot of rape. Women are subjected. There's no structures, there's no government, there's nothing. It's hooligans that are in charge of everything. That is not by accident, that is deliberate. because at the end of the day, there's someone who benefits by getting those resources very cheaply at the expense of our communities. And therefore, for me, it just speaks to the greed that exists in the corporate world. And unless and until we all decide to address the issue of greed and supernormal profits at the expense of communities, then we cannot talk of a just energy transition. The moment we decide to address this, to ensure that there is accountability from the time that the minerals are extracted to the end of use of these minerals, that is the only time we can actually start discussing about a just energy transition. This therefore means that there is need for us to all first come up with policies around these issues. The issue is there is no willpower, there is no support. Corporates are not ready to sit on a round table and discuss these issues. I remember in 2017, I was still quite energetic and young and very optimistic. And I pushed for a UN resolution on used lead-acid battery recycling in Africa. The reason we did that is because we had done a study in several countries in Africa, and we found that communities had lead levels as high as 420 micrograms per deciliter of lead, at a definition of lead poisoning by WHO of 5 micrograms per deciliter of lead in blood. We had communities in Africa, and those were not just in one country, it was in different African countries, that were doing this recycling without even understanding the consequences or why their communities were falling sick. And I thought this was a good thing, and we went through the process and we got the UN to start negotiations on the resolution. What amazed me was that even though it is the African countries that were pushing for this resolution, we got a really strong push against a lot of the strong wording that we had put. One of it is that we needed accountability for the end of use of your product. If, for example, you are getting lead from Africa, if it ends up in your battery, you have to have some kind of responsibility if it kills someone in Africa. We got a very strong resistance from the big economies that we thought would support this. And the reason they gave is that because their corporates would not accept this. So for me, this spoke to a very deliberate decision to ensure that this is being done in Africa. And for me, it spoke to the fact that they knew what they were doing. We ended up with the resolution, but it was very weak. There was no accountability. It spoke about, checks and balances, but nothing to do with what we are calling justice for communities that actually bear the brunt for extractivism. So unless we are ready to address this, then we cannot talk of a just energy transition.
So the point you're making is really important, that unless the green energy transition is based on a global justice framework, we run the danger of promoting green colonialism, where the sustainable lifestyle of wealthy populations are maintained by the dispossession and destruction of livelihoods of communities in the global South. Juan Pablo, what do you think about this dilemma that we face, or this challenge that we face?
Yeah. I would add an element to the definition of sacrifice zones, because you mentioned, the industrial saturation, right? Pollution, contamination, the degradation of the local environment, etc. But there is also the fact that the local people, are becoming impoverished, right? And somebody is becoming rich in terms of money, which is not real richness, but you know what I mean. So that element is there, it's like a sucking, that's why extractivism is such a good, appropriate term, right? And the thing is, our country, unfortunately, and again, I'm not negative and I'm not pessimistic, but we need to be realistic. Chile is a sacrifice country. You have to kind of visualize our territory, this very long, 4 kilometers and something, long, continental without considering Antarctica, very narrow, 170 kilometers average width Chile. In one part is 90 kilometers, and then the desert, the central zone, the rainier south, right, and then the end of the continent and the ices and the ocean to the west, right? So it's very seismic, might be one of the most seismic territories in the world. We have the record of an earthquake in the 60s, 9.3, I remember well, Imagine that power of earthquake somewhere else. Chile is curious because somehow we resist, these earthquakes pretty well, and extremely volcanic. So Chile has like a fragile territory, seriously. It's like a little echelon between one of the highest cordilleras in the world and the ocean. And in fact, there is a trench where the Nazca plate is subducting under the South American plate, which causes all these earthquakes. And this trench runs in parallel, only 150 kilometers away from the coast, all along Chile and along in parallel of Peru. So it's a territory that we should take care with, with particular care. Sorry for the redundancy, And instead of that, what happened? The Spanish came to plunder. The Europeans came to plunder all over the planet, right? We know that. And I think we need to talk more about the savagery of, colonialism, European colonialism and imperialism. And remember, the US originally is a colony of the British. We were laughing the other day, maybe the most effective of all the imperialists are the British. They invaded, practically all the continents, So this plunder paradigm, let's go to this country and extract gold, silver, people. I look at the I'm sorry, I'm going to say pretty awful things, Look at this country. The British come, they land in the coast there, they get weapons and more people, whatever, and then they start moving from east to west, And any indigenous people that was in the way, if they didn't bow down and become their servants, they were murdered. They were not murdered and extinguished because of their resilience and the power of their cultures and the relationship to the land. You see, that's why they survived. But more even, while that was happening, they were bringing people from Africa to work in the plantations. That image is really something astounding, And it's good to look at this, not to suffer, but to take, really be conscious of this, And no European country until now has asked for forgiveness or offered serious reparations, to do all these peoples all over the world, It's pretty amazing. So Chile, coming back to Chile, we got stuck because the Chilean oligarchy, after Chile became a republic in 1810, whatever, they kept going straight with the plunder paradigm. So what are the pillars of the Chilean economy? Down to today, 21st century, mega mining, industrial fishing, including trawling, that is finishing everything, everything disappearing, all the fish, are disappearing, literally, becoming smaller and smaller, etc. And then plantations of pines. In fact, one of the species used is Pino radiata from here, from California. That species is not the culprit of anything, It's a beautiful species, as everything that nature creates, but it comes from ecosystems, sandy, rather arid ecosystems. And you take them to Chile, cut the native forest. Native forest creates soil, right, organic matter, and then you plant pines, and these pines, they grow like rockets, right? And you know how economists call this? It's una comparative advantage. We have a comparative advantage to grow pines. No, this, languages and this way of thinking, And then check out this, fruits, man. Fruits, agro-industry. I've been telling everybody here that the latest craze in agro-industry in Chile is European hazelnuts. We don't consume tons and tons and tons of European hazelnuts in Chile. This is for making probably Nutella and for making European chocolates. I don't see any other destination for that. And the Chinese now, instead of buying the cherries from Chile, they love the Chilean cherry and cherries in general. They're beautiful. But now they're buying the lands. So they don't buy the cherries from Chilean agriculturists, but they plant the cherries themselves, you see. So that's what I mean. Chile is like a country of extractivism and totally colonial. I don't say neo-colonial. It's colonial. Examples. The water of Santiago, 8 million people. You know who owns the water of Santiago? GDF Suez, a French company. 80% of the water in Santiago is a French company. The energy, 80% of the electricity market, Enel from Italy. I could keep going and going. The main transmission line and company in Chile, Transelec, it's the Brookfield Asset Management from Canada, who handles the money of Ontario, British Columbia teachers, and makes it grow, doing transmission in Chile. In fact, it's kind of funny, but it's not funny, you see. So this is a situation, and I think this repeats itself. Chile is like a showcase, and the military had 17 years to make this grow and consolidate, right? And it was entrenched, as I said, in the Constitution, 1980 Constitution. The model is entrenched in the Constitution. What Phyllis was saying, and the laws in Chile and norms and regulation are against the environment, against the community, against the people, in favor of corporations. You should see our pyramid, socioeconomic pyramid. It's not even like this. It's like this. I wrote a book, where we studied this. The typical thing, though, the 1%, the concentration of wealth is brutal. Like the 10 richest percent are perceiving 45% of GDP, And then it goes down, and then like 60% of population is perceiving, and the poorest percent is perceiving a fraction of 1% of GDP, you see. So it's structural. The thing is, what do we do? I think that is the big question. What did we do? What have we humbly done? I gave you the example. I was saying yesterday, sometimes we are pacifists. We are pacifists, But sometimes part of the solution is to oppose things, oppose bad ideas, oppose so-called development projects, peacefully, but oppose them, frontally. And to do that, you need to build coalitions. You cannot do that alone. You cannot do that a single NGO. In the case of Patagonia, without dams, the coalition finally was 80 organizations from Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, as I was telling people yesterday, from the US, We had very good support from the US, the Natural Resources Defense Council, because they said, we'll help, but we'll help you trying to demonstrate the alternative to this mega dam project. So how Chile could, somehow produce electricity without the dam. So, and then international rivers, that they are based here in Oakland, I think, international rivers, they also helped a lot, And we had help because Chilean Endesa, the company that started the project in Biobío and then in Patagonia, it was bought by Spanish Endesa, imagine. And then Spanish Endesa was bought by Enel from Italy, right? So we had to develop campaigns. I was the international coordinator. So first I went to Spain, and it was amazing. In a little while, we had 15 Spanish NGOs supporting the campaign. Wow, amazing, because Patagonia is not in their territory. So that's solidarity, global solidarity. And then one day I was traveling to Spain, and in the plane I read the paper, and Enel had just bought Spanish Endesa. So I had to change and start going to Italy. But again, which is a pleasure in some ways, I hate flying, but anyway. But again, in a few weeks and months, we had the support of 15 again or more Italian organizations, because they also criticized Enel in their own country very critically, right? So that's one way, and the other way, which I think is the bottom thing, what we should do is education. Education, 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 which is, for me, I'm here for that reason, to talk to you, to touch, if possible, with Phyllis, touch your hearts and your minds, and invite you to, be proactive citizens, And in these coalitions, we need everybody. We need the lawyers, we need the economists, we need the anthropologists, we need the sociologists, we need everybody on board, doing their job and helping to make a better world.
It seems that from both of your comments, becoming really aware of how interconnected we are, our destinies are, our communities are. We can't have, the joy of driving an electric vehicle here in California when indigenous communities in the highlands of the Andes are being dispossessed, or when communities in Mombasa or Kenya or Africa are also being affected. But that understanding, that awareness requires really a mind shift, a cultural change, a change of paradigm. And there are many movements in the Global South that are inviting us to think about reframing these issues, right? So I want to, and talk about the importance of care, the importance of equality, justice, reparations, reciprocity, democracy at the heart of any process of energy transition. Beside education, how much weight do you see or do you give to this cultural transformation? Because when we look at the political alternatives that are being offered, green capitalism, resource nationalism, post-extractivism, they seem far away. What can we do? What can we do on the basis of our experience to help, a just energy transition move forward? So my question or my prompt for your comments is the role of cultural change, the role in changing the way that we think about the world to make this possible.
Changing the world starts with individuals, ourselves. One of my most favorite countries in the world is Finland, because I've traveled to Finland, and I've interacted a lot with the Finns, and I have seen how the Finns have changed the way they think and adopted and accepted a very, they are calling it minimalistic, but it's a very eco-friendly way of life. Many of them have changed their dietary habits. They have changed how much they consume in terms of energy, and they do this at a personal level. Nobody forces them to do it. It's not government that is pushing it. It's not the politician. It's not the Greens or the, It is individuals within the public. And because the individuals are pushing this, then those in power and those in politics are forced to follow suit. So for me, it's about civil society, academia, and all of us trying to focus on changing our communities, our families, our people, how we think, how we decide. Owning a car is not bad, but if I decide that I will try to hold the person that I buy the battery from accountable to where my battery ends, I will only give you my business if you assure me that this battery is not going to kill someone in Africa. If you do that at a personal level, that eventually will change, because politicians will not change. Those in power will not change. They will always align with corporations. But if the masses decide to change, if we all decide that enough is enough, that we are going to be our brother's keeper, that we are not going to allow our habits, our own individual habits, to affect someone else in a different part of the world, eventually the politicians will want to align with that, because they need the public, they need the acceptance from the public. I have seen that work very well in Finland, and I believe it's a good model. I believe that instead of all of us focusing on trying to get politicians to make decisions for us, we need to start changing our own habits. At our small level, at our family level, here as a community, as an institution, decide how we are going to ensure that at the end of the day, whatever we consume has zero negative effect on anyone else or on the environment. Eventually, this will catch up, and this is what will end up changing or influencing the decision makers as well.
Thank
you. For me, this issue of cultural change and cultural revolution is fascinating, because I think it's the key, change in our minds. And I said that this paradigm, the extractivist paradigm, got entrenched in our constitution and our laws, but also it got entrenched culturally. The people in the mining regions in Chile, they know mining is harming them, but they cannot imagine their lives without mining, because mining is everywhere. Somehow everybody in some way is related. In Antofagasta, Tarapacá, Atacama is related to the mining operations, you see. And in the south, in the regions where are the plantations of pines, the thing I have observed exactly the same phenomena. They know it's a disaster, that they cannot visualize their regions without the so-called forestry, the plantation business. And curiously or not curiously, totally logically, these two macro regions are the poorest in Chile, particularly the one with the plantations. And one of the poorest regions in Chile and most affected by plantations is Araucanía, where most of the Mapuche, the originarian people of the country, one of them, because there are 11 now recognized, where the Mapuche live. So you have ecocide leads to sociocide directly. Directly. The ecocide leads to a sociocide. So the paradigm becomes entrenched even in language. It's even epistemological, you see. People start not seeing the reality of a different way of life. But you see, for example, they tell you that a dam is an artificial lake. It's not a lake. A lake is, it's got, ecologically, it's a marble or whatever. A dam can ever be, and on top of everything, a dam is moving constantly to throw the water to the turbine, to gather the water. So they tell you a plantation is a managed forest. It's a lie. So we have to be very aware. You know, we have a president of Chile saying in his public address, on, how you call this, when they give the speech one time a year, you know, saying, we cannot, the president of Chile, we cannot keep wasting the water of rivers into the sea. A president of a country, you know, with that kind of ignorance in his brain, you know, it's pretty astounding. So you see, the revolution has to go deep, deep, deep. And I want to say this, you know, I think that we need to put, I said this yesterday, I know what happens in the minds of many people, because I say we need to put nature first. And so they say, wow, this person doesn't care about the poor, doesn't care about people. No. Where does the air come? This is not ideological. This is not deep ecology. This is pragmatic. Where does the air come from? Who does, you know, whatever operation is necessary to keep 21% of oxygen in the air? Have you thought about that? It's pretty amazing. If only the amount of oxygen would increase 4, read James Lovelock and other people, 5%, everything, even wet things, would start, you know, taking fire. So it's not trivial. Who's doing that? Keeping the 21% of oxygen in the air. Where does the water come from? The water is cosmic. We don't even know how water got to this planet. We think it's asteroids, ice asteroids, you know, that entered the planet when it was magmatic and then went out through the volcanoes in the form of water vapor, right? But we don't even know. This is a miraculous element. Totally, totally miraculous. Strange. I could speak for hours about water, you know. I wrote a little book called Biosphere, We Are Water. We are 70% water. Our blood is 90% salty water, like the ocean from where life sprang, you know. You take out the corpuscle, the glóbulos rojos and glóbulos blancos, the white and red cells, and the plaquettes, it's 90% salty water. So water comes from nature. Air with 21% oxygen comes from nature. Where does food come from? Nature. So we need to put nature first, you know. And nature was first and millions of years before human beings. Not to speak of sapiens, you know, millions of years before. We are the latest creation, you know, and we took over this planet with this brutality and this ignorance, you know. You know, in fact, you know what science shows us now, you know? We have 37 million cells in our body. And we have 10 times more bacteria than cells. We have 370 million bacteria in our body. And in fact, we cannot digest without our microbiota, digestive microbiota. So we are chimeras, and we have like 380 million viruses in our bodies and constantly living with us. The mitochondria that give us the energy to the cells, I'm sorry. But this is the cultural revolution. You're understanding where we are standing, man. We don't understand where we are standing, you know. And we are so disrespectful with the biosphere, you know. We are a beauty. Human beings are beautiful. But we are a tiny speck speck, of beauty there among all these other 5 kingdoms, the bacteria. Do you think about the bacteria? They are the basis. They are the basis of life. Algae. The link between bacteria and terrestrial beings, animals, plants, fungi,
Well, it seems this is a topic that really
Well, this is
sets you
yeah,
off.
right.
We have questions from the audience here, and I think it'd be wonderful if you could address them in the time that we have. I'll read 2 together at the same time, and then where is the leadership, the will to move away from, quote, meeting energy demand, end of quote, to leading forward towards less energy use? Why isn't conservation of energy a part of the broader discourse on a green future? That's one question. The other question, and is, have we heard of, quote, sacred economies or donut circular economies? Thoughts? I'll read one more, just to throw them in the mix. I don't want to be disrespectful, but how can we ensure that the global north stays accountable for our recycled materials? Stays accountable for our recycled materials. So I'll stop there. That's a first set of questions. How do we move away from meeting energy demand? Sacred economies? How do we make sure that the global north stays accountable for recycled economies?
Sure. I spoke for a long while.
All right, how do we ensure that the global north stays accountable for your own energy needs? I go back to what I had said before. It's about individual accountability. It's only when we start as individuals to hold ourselves accountable to where even our resources are going. If I'm going to buy a Tesla, how am I holding Tesla accountable for where they're getting their minerals from? So for me, it's asking us to hold Tesla accountable it's humongous. It's something that's nearly impossible. But if each one of us decides to do it at our own level, then it's possible to shake them to a point where they decide to look and say, okay, we're going to be more accountable to our own energy needs. I will give an example. If they need, I think I'm repeating myself, but if they need minerals from Africa, it can be done. It is perfectly possible for it to be done with respect to the environment, respect for communities, and ensuring that we leave the planet at least not as damaged as is being done right now. Because what we've seen, for example, in the coast in Mombasa, where I live, there is a lot of titanium mining. And it's just extraction, and they leave open, holes in the ground where even they don't even try to rehabilitate those grounds for the communities. They leave land that can never be used for agriculture or for anything else. And yet, with just a little bit of input, it's perfectly possible to rehabilitate these grounds to a point where it can regenerate and can be useful even in future for communities. But that is not what is happening. And again, it's about greed and profit. Because investing in nature, investing in communities will reduce the profit margins. And this is what we need to start addressing at our own individual levels. And that's the only way then we'll be able to reach those that can actually make decisions regarding these issues. Otherwise, Africa, the global south, will continue paying the price for the lifestyles here to be sustained. Sacred economies. I have not heard of sacred economies.
Sacred, yes.
Sacred.
Sacred economy.
Donut economies.
Donut economy.
Would you?
Circular economy.
Or circular economy.
Like a donut.
Yeah. Would you like to take that question?
Sure.
We have many questions, Juan Pablo.
I'll try to be very brief. You know, regarding the first question, you know, they usually push us like as if the discussion was how to generate more and more and more, as if that was the challenge. Totally wrong, right? We need to consume less and less and diminish demand, curtail demand. And these have to be, you know, collective efforts, and have to be entrenched, all these changes, again, in constitutions and laws and in the minds of people, right? It's the only way, you know. So efficiency is a way to save electricity, you see. But then, you know about Gibbon's paradox? That the more you save, the more you use? Oh, check it out, you know. That happens. That the energy that is saved is used too, you see, on top of the energy that was being used, you know. So that's why it has to be a revolution that goes down to the root of the problem, right? Not easy, but at the same time, right, it's such a fantastic challenge for the young. That's what I say, you know. It looks scary. The world is not, I mean, it's a suffering world, it's a suffering biosphere, but the challenge to heal this is fantastic. You know what I mean? It's like, let's take that challenge, you know, to transform this. I think it's the adventure, you know. And then we need to downsize the energo-intensive sectors. What are we saying here? We haven't even touched the issue of war and the arms industry. Come on. The Department of Defense of the United States of America is the main consumer of oil in the world, and by far. So, consequently, it's the main emitter of greenhouse gases of the world, by far. You know, somebody sent me, in fact, Oli, from the Right Livelihood Foundation, he knows about certain of my obsessions and this obsession with war and the arms industry, and he sent me a book that I don't remember the names of the authors, but I could send it to you all. It's called Ecologies of Power, like this. 2 PhDs that studied from top to bottom, you know, the Department of Defense of the United States. And they discovered things like this, which is pretty obvious though. But, so what's the point? I think that maybe 70% of the mining that is being done in the world with devastating impacts is for the arms industry. Easy, 70%. You know, the hull of one of your carriers, I mean the US carriers, not your carrier, but just the hull of one of the carriers, you know, they weigh 100,000 tons of steel. The purest steel that human beings can produce, you know, to make a ship that is going to transport 75, you know, fighter, bombers, planes, tanks, and trucks, you know. And all that metal finally is going to end up as chatarra, scrap. You know, the ships, they sink them. They take them to deep places and they sink them. There is one of the laureates of this prize, of the Right Livelihood Prize, you know, Nikitin, he discovered and exposed that the Russians, I mean Soviet Union, were sinking the nuclear submarines with the reactors active inside. I think he had to flee the country. I'm not sure, but something like that. So can you imagine? So imagine the other side. Let's end with war and the arms industry. The world, the biosphere changes cosmically. The emission. And sorry, but who can deny that? Sorry, Fernando, just 1 second. Sacred economies. But let's do something, please, about war and the arms industry, please. Let's do something. I mean, more than something, right? Let's build up a global campaign to stop this craziness, you know? Then sacred economies, there have been sacred economies on this planet all over the place. Indigenous peoples. I don't idealize. There have been indigenous people who have also lost the way, you know, who didn't see the ecological aspect clearly. See the Maya, you know, there's many examples. Easter Island is another example, right? You know, the Easter Island was covered by forests, and the trees were cut down for, well, fire and canoes and whatever, but above everything else, to move the Moais to the coast, from the interior to the coast. You know, it's like the Moais for me are a curse, you know, a kind of a curse, you know. So they didn't see it coming. You know, Jared Diamond, in his book Collapse, he asks, you know, what must have that Easter Islander had been thinking when he cut the last tree in the island? There was a giant palm even growing there. Paleoecologists have studied all this, you see. So sacred economies, they have existed and they could exist again, but we have to go back to the land. We have to go back to frugality, to live in a totally different way. And that's a sacred. What is economy? What is ecology? The logic of home. Oikos is home. Economy is the numbers of home. Savage capitalism are not the numbers of home, you know. It's something else and totally out of control, you know. And circular economies is kind of the same concept, right? Where you don't take more out of the system of what you are receiving, the system needs, you know, to stay in good shape.
Both of you have mentioned kind of the challenges, personal challenges, individual challenges, the challenges of building movements. And here's a question that takes us a little bit out of the green transition, but I think is relevant. The question says, can you share more about your path into activism and what you've learned about effective organizing? And what has it meant for your life and activism to become a Right Livelihood laureate?
I think no one ever grows up thinking I want to be an activist. But you find yourself in situations that leave you with no choice but to become an activist. In my case, for example, my childhood, I believe, a little bit contributed to the path that I've taken in life. I grew up in the rural part of Kenya, on the farm. We grew our own food. We learned to work. We respected nature. We ate fruit from our own trees. And when I moved now to the city to work, even though my family pushed and said, you have to, you know, go into the corporate world, climb the corporate ladder, you know, come back successful so that you can, you know, help your community and things like that. I found myself at a place where I had to decide whether I would stay true to what I knew was right, or I would turn a blind eye to what was happening and choose to continue earning from the system. And for me, it was, I think, an easy choice because it touched me personally, because my own child had been exposed to lead poisoning. And therefore, sometimes I think it was a bit easier for me to make that decision because it touched something personal within me. Now, the journey continuing to be an activist was never easy. There have been a lot of hurdles along the way. At first, I've shared this before, my first shocker actually was, getting arrested and arraigned in court and charged on criminal charges. This is something, I had never slept in a police cell, I had never been arrested. For the first time, I was arrested, arraigned in court, and it was not easy for my family, actually. I remember my grandmother calling me and saying, Phyllis, come back home. We don't need you to be successful anymore, just come back. Just come back, we'll live on the farm and life will be okay. Because for her it was traumatizing to see me thrown on the back of the police car, handcuffed, barefoot, thrown into the cells, and the media was covering it. So that journey was not easy. And yet, for me, even after going through that, I had not mentally actually prepared myself to say I'm an activist. It was actually the act of community that helped me and gave me the strength to identify my role as an activist. Because throughout the mobilization, talking to communities, telling them, we need to test more children, we need to find a way to stop this, we need to protect the children especially. That was easy, The mothers were with me. I mean, the river was polluted. That was a fact. It was undeniable. That was easy. The hard part was now creating the change that I wanted to see. Right. Making government and the corporates actually do what I wanted them to do. That is what became a challenge, and that's what took up most of my time. When we began mobilizing, actually, when I tested I tested my son, he was positive. I tested 10 children for lead poisoning, they were positive. It was easy for the women especially to relate and to come around me because there was that fear already. What then does this mean? What does it mean? Because no one had defined to us what it means to have lead in blood. So for the women, it was very easy because it was about protecting their children. For the men, it was about protecting their jobs and providing for their families, so it was a bit harder. But as we progressed in the campaign, the men also started seeing the effects on their own bodies. I remember one time they called me, the community, the guys who are working in the smelter, called me and they started asking me, like, there's things that we are seeing in our bodies, there's issues, maybe erectile dysfunction and things like that. Do you think it's related to the blood lead levels? And I said, yes, definitely this is related to your blood lead levels, and let's check. And we tested, and they had very high blood lead levels. And we got doctors to talk to them, and of course, because of that, they decided, okay, we're going to join the movement. And so, so along the way, many factors have worked to strengthen the movement. Now, sustaining the movement was something else, because sometimes I miss the first days of creating the movement. When you have no money, you have you have nothing, you are all at the equal level, and all you want to do is challenge this, and you want to protect your community, you want to protect the river, you want to protect. there's that passion and camaraderie among the community, the purpose to achieve something. But then you never anticipate the repression. There was an incident that happened in the community one time when we were having a community meeting, and I was actually holding a child from the community. And I didn't realize that the police were coming, and they came from all over, and then suddenly there was tear gas, and the children were being tear gassed. And even though I was being tear gassed, but my worry was the children were being tear gassed. And immediately after that incident, the corporations around that smelter, metal refinery, decided that they were going to fire, because we had held that meeting on a Monday, and we had asked all the workers, because that community was providing the workers for the whole area. So they decided they were going to fire all the workers who had taken time off to attend our meeting. So the children had been tear gassed, the houses had been raided, and all the food had been poured out by the police. Several people had been arrested, and then so many of the community members lost their jobs. How do you sustain a movement after that? You know, that hit us, and it hit us so hard. We had to start dealing with labor issues, you know, filing labor cases in court, trying to see if the children could get medical help, you know, and we were still a young movement at that time. We had no funds, we had no resources, we had a lot of well-wishers that, you know, were trying to support us. But those moments, looking back, those moments actually strengthened the movement so much. It strengthened the resolve of the community. Actually, the more they were repressed, the more they came together. And these challenges that we were facing on a day-to-day basis meant that we had to meet more often. We had to come up with ideas. We had, as Juan Pablo said, had to bring in partners to teach us, to educate us, to strengthen us, to give us ideas. As I've said before, we saw especially movement of academics coming in, some offering to test, to do, you know, prevalence studies for the community, some giving us ideas of how we could tackle this. And those stages in the movement worked very well in terms of strengthening us. And by the time, because we started in 2009, and we were able to shut down the first smelter in 2014. So it took quite a long time. And during this time, you know, there was police brutality, there was arrests, there were court cases. I have had a criminal record, I think, for the past 15 years because of the work that we did in those early days. But I would say that all that, for me, only worked to strengthen the movement, to create comrades among the community members, to strengthen the resolve. When we finally closed down the first smelter in 2014, we didn't believe it. We thought maybe they would come back, they would find a way to come back. But it didn't. Then we shut down the second smelter, then the third smelter, and we shut down 17 smelters. And by 2016, we had gotten 6 smelters shut down, and we had closed all the avenues. There was no way they were reopening or coming back to Kenya. And therefore, this helped a lot in, you know, creating motivation among the community members. The little wins, the little gains we were making. And then we decided, let's get justice, let's go to court, let's file a case. And then the case lasted, and in 2017, again, we won a major case awarding the community $12 million in compensation for the suffering that they had undergone in the community. So there has, even though it has been difficult, but along the way we got a lot of support. We got some wins also. We didn't always lose. we always had situations where we'd say, okay, we won here, we lost here, we won here. We had cases like the court cases when our people were fired from all the industries. We won most of the court cases for the community. They got compensation. Some were taken back to work, you know. So there's challenges, but along those challenges, all that works to strengthen the movement. It's not easy, but there has to be determination and a focus on what you want to achieve at the end of the day.
You really want to hear about this? No? How I got into activism. To make it really short, you know, music somehow made me see indigenous peoples, because in my childhood I studied in a French school because my father was teaching there, so I didn't have to pay. That was the only reason, a very expensive school. And they were quite, you know, pejorative about Latin America and indigenous peoples. So after the coup, I left the country and I went to visit my mother, that was a political asilada, refugee in Ecuador. And in the streets of Ecuador, I saw these people, you know, amazing people, indigenous peoples. You know? And I was a musician at that time. So the music, the Andean music, wow, just blew my head, you know. And I had like an epistemological rapture because I discovered that indigenous people were, I mean, much more than anybody had told me, right? And they were like, they had a richness, this unbelievable richness. So I went to Canada to do my BA, and I discovered Indo-America from the library of York University at Toronto, Canada. I started looking, you know, at pictures, reading books, and all this. The handling, the management of water in the Andes. You know, Machu Picchu, it's on the top of these peaks, and have had two systems of water, like clean water for drinking and a way of evacuating gray waters. You know, the dirty waters, like total virtuosity in hydraulical, you know, the management of water. I mean, you know, the whole world of appropriate technologies, you know. Look at the Inuit and the kayak. Who invented the kayak, you know? And kayaks were made of organic things, bones and pelts, and you know, and they had to be totally waterproof. That's why they still say, the kayakers, they talk about the Eskimo, which is a wrong word, but the Eskimo roll, right? If you rolled in icy water with many degrees below zero outside, you know, and you don't have a totally waterproof suit, whatever, and the kayak has to be waterproof, you freeze, you die, you know. And they were doing this without any, you know, oil, the right plastic, without no plastic and polyesters. It's pretty amazing. The igloo, it's an evanescent technology made of ice, half of a sphere, so maximum retention of body heat inside. The dogs in the tunnel, you know, less resistance to the wind. I mean, talk about the winds, you know, in the Arctic and whatever. So, and then on top of everything, those persons leave the igloo, and the igloo goes back to the environment. No trace. That's high technology, you see it? So looking at all this, something changed in my head, and I realized that many of these indigenous peoples were way more biocentric than us, or were totally biocentric, you know, that they see the value of human beings, but that value within, you know, the universe of, as I said, of the other four kingdoms of life, you know. So the music led me to see indigenous peoples, and indigenous peoples led me to see the ecological, you know, topic. You know. So then I did a master in environmental studies, again at York University. I had some biology studies first in Chile, 2.5 years, which also marked me quite a bit. I left that career for the musical group I was involved in because it started demanding me full time, right? So I had to leave it. well, sometimes I have repented, whatever. You know, and my thesis, you know, finally was called Of Rooted and Unrooted Peoples. Who are the rooted peoples? Indigenous peoples. Unrooted, us. You know, and I created like a new concept. What is this Western civilization thing? What is civilization, you know? Western from Europe. In fact, you know, the way we have done the cartography, the north up, Europe is up, the developed world is up, and everything good is up. You know, the king is your highness, and the high class, you know, there is a value with the up. And curiously, the developed world is up in the north. Yeah, you laugh, but I think this is the way we need to deconstruct thought and deconstruct language and all these categories, because it's the only way to really change, you see. And the subtitle of my thesis was Towards a Biospherical Being. This was 1986, and I already had the vision of belonging, being a part of this water-based biosphere. The whole biosphere is based in water. You know, a medusa is 99% water. And it has a structure, has energy, has poisons, has etc. It's 99% water. A baby in the belly is 95% water. You know, and in fact, aging is, how you say this, marchitando, is marchitarse? But a plant, what does a plant do when it dries? There's another word.
Wilting.
Wilting, dehydrating. Aging is dehydrating. Seriously. And it's not that if you drink water, you won't age. No. The problem is no. Seriously, the system, your kidneys, your liver, your whole metabolism is deteriorating. So you are not being able to assimilate the water down to the last cell of your skin, etc. But the point is, I totally went off the point.
But people should read his essay on water.
Okay.
I had my students in my class read it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's very poetic. It's very thought-provoking. It really helps you understand this passion that Juan Pablo has when he speaks about water, this magical element.
But just to finish, you know, I went to live with the Huichol Indians in Mexico as part of my master in environmental studies, because I had this itch, you know, to share, to live with indigenous peoples. And the Wirrárica, they're called Wirrárica, they have been called by anthropologists one of the less acculturated indigenous peoples in the world, you know, because they found refuge in the western Sierra Madre, right? They used peyote for the ceremonial life, right? I spent 8 months living with them. I went with 50 pilgrims to Wirikuta in Real del 14 to harvest the peyote. So I discovered, you know, a real indigenous people, lots of problems, whatever. So when I went back to Chile and I discovered the Pehuenche by chance, but I won't tell you, there's too many stories, you know, facing this mega dam complex, you know, I was totally, you know, indignant. And I said, you know, we need to do something. And we started the campaign. That was the beginning of the campaign. And the campaign has always been, you know, as I said, build up coalitions, very diverse people with many skills and knowledges, you know, the political, the legal, the technical, the evaluation, impact, you know, assessments, this big, you know, that you have to analyze. Somebody has to do that, you know. Lots of information comes forth from there, etc., etc., etc. So I became an activist in a way, you know, somehow life, if you let it, pulls you and calls you. You know, maybe if I had known, with the Bio, we were talking to Dave, you know, we got straight into the belly of the beast, seriously, because I told you all the issues that were in confluence there. If I had known what we were getting into, maybe I would have gotten scared, seriously. I don't repent. I'm so super happy, right? But There is this thing of, opening yourself to be called to things, Let magic enter your life. So it's not all rational and all planned, beforehand.
Well, I think
Yeah.
here, I think we have heard two different paths towards activism and engagement, and amazing fearlessness and a vision about our future. Phyllis and Juan Pablo, I'm going to ask a big round of applause for them, and many questions and answers. Thank you so much for your life and for your example.
Hello, there we go. Hey, great. So we hope this has given you some food for thought. We hope it's given you some inspiration. They'll hang out for a little bit to talk, hopefully. But we wanted to end tonight with something for your soul, for your spirit. We have a special guest who's been with our students all day long and hearing the discussions and presentations to students across multiple classes. And he's here to reflect a bit on that experience. Jehan Kaligi, he's a spoken word poet, a youth educator, a community arts organizer. And Jehan, please come up and share with us your perspectives and experiences from the day.
Hey, brother. Nice to see you. All right. Thank you for everything. Blessings on you. All right. Greetings, everybody. Can you hear me? All right. So my name's Jehan Kaligi. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. It was a pleasure to travel up here from Oakland and sit listening to everybody's stories and to be a part of this gathering. I feel very honored. So my task was to listen to the perspectives shared and weave some sort of poetic offering at this stage. So this is a poem I wish to share with you in honor of our convergence today, in honor of all the forces that conspired to allow us to be here together. In honor of these two laureates here, can we please give a round of applause for them too? And that these words may in some way fuel the roots of their work. And I dedicate these words also to this year's laureates and the student delegates who came out today. So this is a poem that emerged from today's time together. Standing on a precipice where the future meets the past, we ask, what cracks in the world's collapse are tasks for our mending? What vital messages is nature sending, and how are we as students of Right Livelihood to hone our tools for tending? Consider the legacy of Wangari Maathai, Mama Miti, the mother of trees, and how her hands became an extension of the regenerative Earth's imagination. From Kenya to Bangladesh, Pakistan to Cambodia, Congo to Chile, our peoples struggle for sovereignty, palms clutching endangered seeds as a capitalist beast with sharpened teeth and an insatiable hunger threatens to eat our future, with no regard to the rich histories packed into the marrow of our bones. The same corrupt leaders who pollute the waterways in Cambodia are the same ones who genetically modify seeds in India, robbing farmers of their future. The same dementors of doom who ram mega dams into native communities are the same politicians who privatize fear and enforce policies of degradation that aim to make casket of community. What is the value of progress? at the expense of a livable planet, at the expense of lost languages, at the expense of grandmother's wisdom, at the expense of our children's right for a liberatory education? What is progress when the land becomes a victim and all our rich traditions are under attack? Consider how our original myths and stories are storehouses that contain within their metaphorical frame the ethics, values, and aims to maintain right relation. The cultural art of our survival is dependent upon solidarity. Our future hinged upon our capacity to learn each other's struggles, like we learn each other's songs, like we remember each other's names, like we listen to each other's dreams and break bread in respect to the invisible yet undeniable source that sustains us. The world needs bridge builders, web weavers, seed savers, song catchers, beauty makers, risk takers, story stewards, and water protectors. And when the ground shakes, we link our roots where soil's been depleted, educate ourselves lest histories get repeated, and thread our movements into an intricate pattern of shared resource, the way a redwood tree transfers nutrients through a vast underground mycelial network of reciprocity. In a time of crisis and urgency, what does a watershed have to teach us about skillful strategy? What does a riverbank have to show us about resilience? What does a mountain have to tell us about memory? What of this ancient oceanic bloodline, the heart's incessant pulsation, our lungs filled and emptied of the forest's generosity, the sea's ceaseless churning, the sun's regenerative burning, a hummingbird's persistent wings, the star's unstoppable procession across the sky, or the immense power encoded in a thunderstorm, in a hurricane, in a people's resistance? Who amongst us will carry this legacy of stewardship like a sacred deed, to believe that the more seemingly insurmountable the problem, the more rigorous our need to imagine the impossible, to dream the world anew like spring's insurgents, and trust the struggle for which we all may flourish inside a stream of life that always surges, where what we love becomes our only purpose. All right, thank you so much.
That's it. Thank you all. Be safe going back home. Thank you for coming.